Good. Welcome, everybody. I cannot see, since I'm sharing my screen, how many participants we have, but I hope we have most of you on board now. Otherwise, your colleagues will join us probably in a moment. So welcome to this kickoff meeting of the research program SDG Interactions and Policy Interventions in Developing Countries. I'm pleased to see a lot of familiar but also new faces, from researchers, consortium members, representatives of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, aspired members of the Supervisory Committee, and of NWO staff. So I virtually salute all of you in the world, in the morning, afternoon, or evening, and thank you so much for participating in this meeting today. My name is Martijn Winia. I work with the Dutch Research Council NWO, and I am the program coordinator. I think we are all excited that after significant delays, this research is finally taking off today. This research program is initiated and funded by the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs, NWO, and the NWO Department Votro Science for Global Development. Now, the objectives and ambitions of the research program align with the Sustainable Development Goals for Inclusive Global Development track of the Dutch research agenda. So you've been hearing a lot of Dutch and Netherlands here, but obviously the themes and challenges are global. Today, the three thematic research project teams, the cross-cutting knowledge brokering and synthesis project team will present their plans and ideas. And also the relevant thematic policy departments at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will outline their policy priorities. This will help us to identify connections for integrated and joint program work. And I will say more about that later on. Now, as you are probably aware, this is not a classic research program with fixed tasks and obligations. We want to have your energy and creativity to realize the ambitions that we have. I will not say much now. Nikki Pauw from the University of Amsterdam has kindly accepted to moderate this meeting. And I'm also having a terrible cold, so I want to spare my voice a bit. But before I hand over to Nikki, a few words on the logistics. I bet you are all familiar with online Zoom meetings. So please use the chat function to post questions or raise your hands by clicking on the reactions button below. Please mute your audio when not speaking and use an easily identifiable name or nickname and add your affiliation. And in case you need any technical assistance, use the chat function. Now on the agenda. Well, you have all received the agenda, so I will not read it out to you. But just to highlight the main ingredients, the first part of the meeting has a welcome statement from the Chief Science Officer at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Professor Dirk-Jan Koch. And next, we will listen to a keynote speech from Dr. Pradhan from the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. And then I will present the program setup to you. And because of my cold, this is a previously video recorded presentation. And then we come to the heart of the meeting. The ministry departments will each present their policy frameworks and priorities. And next, the four research teams will present their research plans. And then in 5 minutes, we will have a discussion on how to effectively organize and structure policy dialogues and joint research activities. So all in all, this is a jam-packed program, but I'm looking forward to hearing and learning from all of you. I wish you a very inspiring meeting today. And it's now over to you, Nikki.
Thank you, Martijn, for these nice welcome words. Also, on behalf of me, I would like to wish everybody welcome at this official kickoff meeting in a time of the year that all of you are probably tremendously busy. I would like to add to Martijn's words that this is a getting to know each other meeting, whereby we have a very nice interaction, I think, between policy and research, whereby people of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will spell out the policy questions. And of course, we will hear in more detail about the selected research project, all in relation to the three research themes. And of course, there's also time for the knowledge brokering and synthesis project. Without further ado, I would like to give the floor now to Professor Dirk-Jan Koch, who's going to deliver the welcome statement on behalf of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Dirk-Jan, if you are ready, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. And the welcome statement sounds so official, but I just want to share my enthusiasm with you, actually, because you know, I'm the Chief Science Officer of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we're really trying to push this more structured collaboration between science and policy. And we think that with this program, we're really going to make it happen. So we're really counting on NWO to construct this program, but we see that there's a very enthusiastic scientists really willing to walk together with the civil servants in this research. I see a lot of civil servants present as well, willing to engage. I think we've really tried to structure a program in which there is enough room to adapt the research to changing realities, to demands from the civil servants, but at the same time that there's enough space, time, and rigor to do this in an academically sound and responsible way. So we're very keen to meet the researchers. Some of them, of course, we know already a bit, but some of them are quite new. Especially, we are excited about this team of SDG interactions. When we were developing this program, I think we started about 2 years ago together with Martine Rutte. We were thinking that maybe we're thinking too positive about how these SDGs are always mutually reinforcing, but maybe they're not always automatically mutually reinforcing. And now 2 years later, we see that there's more studies coming up which say that in some cases they are, and that's great, and we should capitalize on that. But in some instances, they are not. I see that the friends from the broker, Magendane, Kiza, and Kapozoglu have written a very interesting literature review. I think I'll also assign it to my students moving forward. I think it really shows that indeed what we need is more context-specific studies into the SDGs. And I think that's actually what you will all be doing over the coming years. So we're looking forward to this. So this is really something different. You will already see it by means of this interactive session this morning when we kick off the research. This is the first time that I see so many civil servants present at the kickoff, so that's great. I see that NWO is also investing a lot of funding of their own funding into making sure that all the knowledge is shared and all the knowledge is used. So we will do our best from our end, from the ministry, to make sure that you get as much input as needed. And please do remind us if you feel that we are not living up to the expectations. Have a good morning, and over to you, Nikki.
Thank you very much, Dirk-Jan, for your inspirational words and for providing some insights into the background of all this. I would like to give the floor now to a distinguished guest, Dr. Prajal Pradhan of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, who's going to give a short keynote on SDG interactions and policy interventions. Since we are on a tight schedule, Dr. Pradhan, I will raise my hand in the screen if you have 1 minute left to round off. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Nikki. And thank you, Dirk-Jan, to introducing this thing about SDG interaction, how crucial it is. Yeah? So, and today I will be talking about like why it is even more crucial in case of policy interventions, because whenever we are implementing certain policies, our objective is to do benefits, but sometimes unknowingly we may also doing harm. However, like I would like to draw the attention that we are talking about sustainable development not starting 2015. We already started in 1980s, especially our common future report has defined what does sustainable development means. And here in terms of sustainable development, we all know that we need to balance our economic activities for societal well-being, and all these activities need to be within environmental boundary, or in the current term, we can call it like within planetary boundary. So in general, what we can say is like the concept of sustainable development is not new. We are talking about that for decades now. However, on the course of time, what we have done is like we are prioritize our economic activities, economic well-being or economic benefits, and sideline our environmental issues or transgress planetary boundaries, and our economic activities is also not able to provide societal well-being. So instead of Bula economy, we went to Mickey Mouse economy. And the question is like, why that is the case, even though we are talking about balancing environment, society, and economy. And one of my hypotheses here is like, whenever we are talking about this balancing three dimensions of sustainability, we are not looking too much in detail about interactions among these three different dimensions and three different factors. And when we talk about sustainable development goals, I would say like it will be really crucial to look at those interactions. Otherwise, if we look at environmental issue, economic issue, and social issue as a separate thing in silos, then we might not reach the holistic development that is envisioned by the 2030 agenda. So that's why it is really crucial to understand sustainable interactions among these SDGs. And the question is like how to look at those interactions. And there are different ways to do that. One way would be to look at it in a quantitative way. What we did here is like, in this study, we look at, we use this official SDG data, and then based on this statistical approach, whenever there is a positive correlation, we call it synergies. Whenever there is negative correlation, we call it trade-off. And for all the goals, we look at these information for all the countries. And this is more like a very compact understanding of that. And we can clearly see here, this greenish color is mainly for synergies. And this orange or reddish color is for trade-off. And what we can say is like, even within SDGs, we can see synergies and trade-off. So that means within one SDG, if you are making progress in one indicator or one target, there are cases where we are also making progress in other, but there are also cases when you are making progress in one target, we are hampering the progress in other. One example in terms of SDG 2 would be like, globally, we managed to decrease the undernourishment population, is declining. But at the meantime, the increasing problem is about overnourishment or overweight and obesity. So that sounds like there is something going wrong, because in terms of SDG 2, we need to end all form of malnourishment. And we can see this colorful picture across all SDGs. So that means that there is synergies and trade-off, and that is underlined in our current development paradigm. And for sustainable transformation, we need to utilize those synergies as leverages and break away the trade-off. Why this is important, I will come that later on, but here one example of that would be like, here we can see would be like open defecation, yeah, or clean water and sanitation. Why this is important to reduce underflight mortality. Whenever there is clean water and sanitation, we can see that mortality rate of children has been decreased. So that's what we want. But on the other hand, what we also see is like, whenever there is poverty is reduced, we can see material consumption has been increased. So what we want in terms of SDG is like, we have to reduce our material footprints or material consumption, but at the meantime, we have to also reduce poverty. And the question is like, how to decouple material consumption with the poverty part. And this is not only like relation between two different indicators or two different targets or two different goals. This is more, we need to look at SDGs more as a system, because if we fail to meet one of the target of SDGs, we might fail the whole 2030 agenda. And here in this study, we try to show that when you look at these complex interactions, we can clearly see that for some, like SDG 3, there is a lot of positive linkages. And what happens is like, due to this positive linkages, whole SDGs, if we make a progress on those goals, it make progress on whole SDG system. So that's really a good news. But the bad news is like there are some targets like here in SDG 10 or in SDG 15 or SDG 16. There are some targets where if we make progress there, it will have a negative impact on other goals. So that is on the current development situation. Here, only making progress is not enough. Here we need to break away the trade-off to understand that, and we have to figure out a new development paradigm. So this is this example of quantitative analysis, and we can also look a bit deeper into like a different population group. And here the main message is like, it's not enough to have only one value per country. I think this is not a problem with this project, because the projects are going a bit deeper on a country or a case study label. But here, what we need to understand is like the interactions can differ if you look at this different population group. So we have to treat the vulnerable and marginal population in a special manner, because traditionally they are underprivileged one. And SDG interactions also differ when we look at this different groups. So this is the one way to look at SDG interaction quantitatively based on empirical data. One can also use different models to look at this analysis, which is also quantitative study. But another way is to look at existing literature and try to understand interaction based on that. And in this study, what we did is like how application of nitrogen is, it can cause or can have negative linkages with many SDGs. If you over fertilize, here is like a too much nitrogen, or if we do under fertilization, where there is a fertilization deficit, so it may have a negative impacts on many SDGs. And there are many countries, mainly like high income countries, where there is too much application of nitrogen, low income countries where there is too little application of nitrogen. But in terms of sustainable transformation, what we need is like optimum use of fertilizer, so that we can have like a positive effect on all SDGs. So this is mainly like based on literature analysis. We can use literature to understand that. And also for some transformation to happen in different systems, we also need to achieve many other SDGs that will also provide some enabling conditions. So this is one example of this literature review. And now I would come up with one other example where we did more like a expert-based, opinion-based studies, mainly with this different stakeholders, and using this framework where SDG interactions can be classified into like 7 different scales. So what we did here is like we use this 5-step approach where stakeholders, so I will not go much in detail. And this study shows that COVID-19 can have mainly the negative impacts in short and mid-term, but also can have long-term positive impact if we capture the transformation of opportunity as mentioned by, as provided by the COVID. So on the other hand, we can also combine these 2 different approaches, like quantitative approaches and qualitative approaches, and make a study whenever there is this data gap. Saying that, I would like to summarize. So I think I'm over time now, saying that we do have this qualitative and quantitative methods to understand SDG interactions, not only within SDGs, among SDGs, but also SDG and other systems. And on the current paradigm, we need to break away. We have both synergies and trade-off, and we need appropriate policies to leverage the synergies, but most importantly, to break away the trade-off. And I would like to thank you for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pradhan, and sorry to give so little time for a very interesting presentation. We will share the slides, and I'm sure people will look up your work if they haven't done so already. I'm really glad that you point out that we need to look at the SDGs from this systemic point of view, and that it's not only important to identify where we can leverage synergies, but also identify the trade-offs and find hurdles that need to be overcome. Thank you so much. I would like to move on to Martijn Winia now. The video presentation, Martijn, on the program setup and the inception phase. If you could please start the video.
Hello and welcome everyone. Also on behalf of NWO, my name is Martijn Winia and I coordinate this research program together with my colleagues Maria Verschoor and Nadine Herold. I work with the NWO department, Botro Science for Global Development. I'm excited that after all this time, after significant delays due to the pandemic and an NWO systems hack, we are now finally beginning this research program. I would like to express our gratitude to the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs for initiating and co-funding this program and for contributing to the program design and project selection in such a thorough and constructive way. And of course, congratulations to the researchers for having your exciting research ideas funded. We are proud to be working with all of you and with a group of enthusiastic international experts on board the Supervisory Committee. I think it's good to stress that the Dutch Research Council and the Dutch Research Agenda are very much interested in this program, not least because some of the new approaches in this program that we are piloting. My talk will mostly be about those dimensions. Now, I have the thankless task to tell you things that you probably already know because they are in the Call for Proposals brochure, and I mentioned many things of those in our info session in December. I will not delve into the specific administrative steps towards project implementation because these will be communicated to the research teams in the grant award letter. So in December, we have talked much about the contents of the program, SDG interactions and policy interventions, and about the themes, the cross-cutting issues such as gender and youth, and research fairness. Today is the first in a series of meetings in this program. And I want to sketch to you the rhythm of our meetings and the general program setup. The main message I want to convey is that this program is not business as usual. To realize the ambitions of the program, we need what is often called with an ugly word, knowledge co-creation across disciplines and sectors. This is a challenge which you have responded to both in your research and policy plans. And that is to look beyond specificity, to see what the local situations and trends tell us, and how they tell us something about the bigger picture, other SDGs, the interactions between SDGs, etc. This is the scaling ambition in this program. It also works the other way around, of course, to see and recognize relevant insights from elsewhere. For example, other projects, and to take and incorporate or apply these to your own research or policies. All this requires careful consideration of the ways in which research findings are connected, packaged, translated, and or communicated to broader audiences. Hence the focus in this program on synthesis activities and knowledge brokering. Now, knowledge sharing and synthesis is not an afterthought, but it is inherent in all steps of the research. If successful, this process will foster mutual inspiration and increase the relevance and potential uptake of findings in academia, but also in policy and practice. And this applies that you as research teams will have the flexibility and agility to respond to emerging findings in your project from your colleagues and also emanating from policy dialogues and multi-stakeholder engagement. This is what we mean with a stepwise iterative approach. This approach should be supported by proactive project M&E, including continuous reflection on your theory of change and impact plan. And we think that you, as researchers, should have sufficient room to maneuver. Your research plans are not set in stone, but are refined based on new insights, policy priorities, and/or local circumstances. We don't have to endorse every minor revision, but we certainly want to be involved in your consideration and choices. But we will not let you floating. A supervisory committee of mostly international experts will be established to not only assess your program, but also to be a sounding board for project and program activities. I'm happy that some of the aspired members of this committee are present today. And NWO will provide regular training tailored to your needs. For example, we could offer an impact plan training later on in 2021. One more word on the mutual inspiration from policy dialogues and stakeholder engagement. This is clearly two-directional. As researchers, you are challenged to formulate your insights and research questions in a way that resonates with the realities of your partners. But conversely, here I also call on the colleagues from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to be a partner in dialogue, to take an interest in the emerging findings, and in return to give advice and relevant information regarding policy developments and priorities. The same goes for your other partners and stakeholders. If at all possible, put them in a position where they can be informed about your research proceedings and take their feedback seriously. If and where needed, amplify their voices of marginalized or excluded parties. I cannot but mention enough here the importance of research fairness and equitable partnerships to set a positive scene for all these kinds of interactions to effectively take place. Concretely, which are the next steps for researchers? To ensure the connection between the program level and the project level, you have built-in work packages for knowledge exchange and synthesis and scaling in your proposals. At program level, the 3 thematic projects will have to team up in order to meet the ambitions of the research program. So, the 3 project teams and cross-cutting knowledge brokering and synthesis team together will be responsible for the joint program agenda and its activities. There will be an additional funding of 200,000 euros to support this program team. In the call for proposals, we identified a number of minimum activities to be developed by this team. But we would like this team to take ownership of this process and formulate exciting new activities and products. Think of a special issue, a joint panel at a conference, policy briefs, videos, etc. And we expect a joint work plan proposal within 6 months, so by the end of 2021. The program rhythm is as follows. Annually, we will organize a progress meeting, including plenary policy dialogues, a bit like we are doing today. And during that annual meeting, we can also offer training modules. At program midterm and end term, we will organize a conference. There is NWO budget for these activities, but we can imagine that you want to do add-ons based on the program work plan. All these activities require substantive preparation and support from all of you, researchers, ministry representatives, and members of the supervisory committee. Of course, more targeted research and policy dialogues on specific themes will likely take place on a regular basis throughout the research process. Now, on a project level, all preceding features require proactive and flexible program management. That is why you may use up to 5% of your budget for management. You will have to adopt a stepwise approach. This means that you will now begin with the inception phase. A brief reflection will be submitted to the supervisory committee 6 months from now. And then continuously throughout the project duration, you will have to reflect upon your plans and strategies and refine and/or readjust when needed. Then thorough monitoring, evaluation, and learning is the basis for effective program management. Research teams have to build in a specific M&E work package. Concise annual reports will be submitted to NWO. At midterm and end term, research teams have to organize a broader reflective consortium and stakeholder workshop. And these will be input for self-assessment reports. The midterm evaluation may include a site visit by NWO and the supervisory committee. As I mentioned before, you will not have to account for every choice you make, but we want to keep track of your dilemmas adjustments. So that's it from me. I wish you a fruitful meeting today, and I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Martijn. This was very informative. I understand that 1 or 2 people could not see the video or your slides, but as I said before, we will share the slides afterwards, so you still have a chance to review them. I can imagine the presentation may give rise to some questions, but we Please save them for now, and we will address them at the end of this meeting, especially on the additional budget and project team money, for example. Without further ado, I would like now turn to the heart of the meeting and go deeper into the 3 research themes, whereby the civil servants of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs are going to take the lead now and present us the policy questions within each theme. I'm particularly interested how these questions are put in the present context and how you look at it in the near future. The first theme, the SDG governance and decision-making theme, will be presented by Dr. Martine Rutten and Lieke Willemsen of DEGIS. Whom can I give the floor of the 2 of you?
Me.
Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, it's great to see you all. As Dirk-Jan also said, I was involved in setting up this program from our side together with NWO, and it's nice to see to finally see that we can start. And it's nice to see so many participants from both sides. My name is Martine Rutte, and I work for the Director General for International Cooperation. And my main, the theme that I've been working on for the past couple of years has been policy coherence for development. And this is why I've been asked to say something about the first theme, SDG governance and decision making, which really is closely linked to coherence issues. The idea behind this first part of the call is really to look at it with a helicopter view. So the SDG agenda is, as you all know, universal and holistic, true for everyone, applying to all countries in the world, requiring efforts of everyone. And how then from our perspective, from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and specifically Foreign Trade and Development Cooperation, can we steer this agenda towards the priorities we've set? In this agenda also, the role for development cooperation has changed. It is now much more about broader means of implementation, coherence, partnership for the goals. And are we doing the right things? So the approach of the Netherlands in general with regards to SDG attainment is that we build on existing partnerships and frameworks and align these with the SDGs, but we can probably, and we know that we can probably do better. Our foreign trade and development policy takes the SDG framework as point of departure. And so as formulated in investing in global prospects. As you all know, we're also now in the process of forming a new government and probably with perhaps new policy orientations. And I guess some of the research in this project can also contribute to strengthening our knowledge base and improving our policies. The questions that we have, and as you could have seen in the call, we have grouped them basically into 2 categories. And the first is more the political side of things, for which I'll ask Lieke Willemsen, my colleague from the SDG team, to say something about it. And then the second part is more the technical angle, the underlying instruments that we can use. So Lieke, can I give you the floor on the first part, and then I'll add to that again.
It's okay, thanks Martine. My name is Lieke and I work for the Multilateral Institutions Department. So that means I'm more focusing on the global discussions on the SDGs, of course. Well, we were also involved in this call for research, and we have thought about questions that really help us to well, do a better job, basically. I think what is very important is that that we see a paradigm shift from the MDGs towards the SDGs. So that means, as Martina already said, that also the political or the discussions on the multilateral level have changed and are still changing. Sometimes I say with the SDGs, all countries have become developing countries. So we all have challenges we need to work on. And of course, these challenges for a country like the Netherlands are more related to our footprint, but still the challenges are really, really tough. Well, I think if we talk about the multilateral sphere, it's the main question is how can we leverage our influence on these fora? Because we are not a very big country, so what is strategic to do? So I think that's an important question. And then maybe also what are other relevant partners and platforms? Because we know it's not only about countries anymore, it's about all the different stakeholders and also all levels. So I would say the number of stakeholders has been grown. But this also makes it, you have to be more selective maybe, or more strategic in how you operate in this field. And then the other questions are more related to the bilateral, so our dialogue with national countries, because also the amount of ODA that's going to governments is shrinking. So that also means that the dialogue with countries is also changing, and also more stakeholders on the national level are stepping into the arena. So we have the same question there: how should we operate, and how should we deal with the developing countries, with the focus countries the Netherlands is working with? So I think that are the main questions if we talk about political processes on the multilateral and bilateral levels. Thanks.
Right, thank you, Lieke. Then on the instruments, we basically, we have various instruments that can support SDG implementation. And yeah, we have, first of all, I think on the side of official development assistance, the big question is how can we leverage that and other financing, maybe innovative financing, to contribute to the SDG attainment in developing countries, so the financing for development agenda. What can and should we do here? What can and should we do here differently? The second question, and that really ties up or is related to my field of work, policy coherence for development. We have an action plan that focuses on taking away main obstacles in other areas than development cooperation that impede developing countries in achieving the SDGs. Now, is the focus of the action plan fit for purpose in view of 2030, or are we missing important areas? And can we learn more here from the country perspective? And the final question, more generic question also that we thought of is, I think that nicely ties up with the presentation of Prajal on the role of science and technology and innovation, which has the greatest positive influence on SDG attainment in these developing countries. Is how can we, how do you say that, stimulate the role of science and digital technology more in scaling up transformations, so the transformation side of things, and how to better use innovations in this area.
Thank you, Martina. I would like to ask you to round off now to give time to the other two. Yes?
I'm done. Yeah, this was it.
Okay, great, wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for these relevant questions, and forcing us to also think about what can be potential blind spots, both in terms of stakeholders and topics. Over to the second research theme. addressing trade-offs between food and nutrition security, SDG 2 and the other SDGs, and Wijnand van Ijssel of DEGIS is going to present the policy questions here. Over to you, Wijnand.
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. I hope everybody can hear me. Great, exciting that this finally takes off now. Let's look forward. I'm looking forward to the next part of the agenda, where the proposals actually will come into in the spotlight. For myself, I would like to make 3 points as a background to what will be the continuation of this trajectory. So our previous research cycle and investment started actually in 2013. So that has been for the past 7 years. That was on the basis of what we knew then in 2011, 2012 about food security and the issues that were at play. Indeed, the MDGs. Now we're in 2021, and what we have seen over the past 4 or 5 years is this food system approach, where things have really come together between food and nutrition, agriculture, water, climate, but also institutional issues, power relations, and so on. And it's a great development, but we also are very much aware that we are in the wrong place with our food systems. So this actually, brings up a lot of trade-offs among the SDGs, and particularly with SDG 2. So that is really an area of interest, and that is not only about the trade-offs between agriculture and water use, or agriculture and climate impact, but it's certainly also between the developments and things like power, agency, equity in the system. So really excited to see how this will develop in the calls. And was interested in the work that Professor Pradhan just presented. Actually, pretty interesting stuff. So that's my first point. Really, this systems approach in food systems and the trade-offs that it entails. The second point I wanted to make is that we invest for impact, but the impact is very often beyond our control. But what we do see on the way is that we are moving in looking at our results more from output to outcome levels. And if you move more to the outcome level, assumptions that are under your policy actually become a lot more important. So the testing of assumptions under our policies is a really getting into the spotlight for us as well. So there, it's really a development that is to be aware of, and that hopefully also in the research we can come back to. And the third point I wanted to make is really to capitalize on the Food and Business Research Program that we have been running with NWO over the past 7 years. There are 75 projects have been funded. We have learned an awful lot, both in the way we do research and we approach research projects. But I think Martijn Winia presented just now that a lot of that has been absorbed in the NWA call. So that is great to see. But also in terms of content, we've learned a lot, which is captured in a synthesis study on the Food and Business Research Program, which is really interesting stuff, which also comes back to some extent to the assumptions that I talked about earlier on outcomes. If we if we really reach farmers with extension works, but do they really improve their resilience and living conditions? There are a lot of assumptions under those kind of interventions, and you can dream up hundreds more of these assumptions. So, but there's interesting stuff developed under the Food and Business Research Program. So take that along, look at it, and learn from it. Also, my last point there is one warning to the upcoming programs that we really are looking for evidence behind our policies. So we are investing here in science, and science has to deliver evidence which is relevant for policy. So we are not funding advocacy programs. To really make it science-based and evidence-based. So that would be my messages, Nikki, thanks.
Thank you very much, Wijnand, and thank you for drawing attention again to what we have already learned under the Food and Business program. But also, there's obviously space and need for looking at our underlying assumptions underneath policy, and there we really need rigorous research. Over to the third team, climate change and conflict, presented by Karen Arnon and Jeroen Muntinga. Whom can I give the floor?
Yeah, good morning. My name is Jeroen. I can kick off, and then Karen will wrap up or add. My name is Jeroen Muntinga. I work in the DSH department, so that's Stability and Humanitarian Aid. And Karen works for the IGG, which is the Inclusive Green Growth Department. So we both have an interest in this theme, in this nexus on climate. Well, obviously IGG has it in their prime focus, but for DSH, for conflict prevention, humanitarian aid, and so on, climate is also a relevant factor increasingly as a threat multiplier, which we want to understand better, and we want to deduce what does it mean, what does it imply to our theory of change. From DSH view, so conflict prevention and peace building and humanitarian aid, what is our TOC? Well, theory of change, in very brief, we want to achieve legitimate stability in fragile regions. And the policy note specifies certain regions which we focus on. In brief, Sahel, Horn of Africa, and Middle East, North Africa. So that's basically what we zoom into. And we want to increase the resilience and inclusivity of the peace building, of the life and justice of the people there. We have three pillars basically in our rule of law kind of TOC. First is human security. So do people feel safe? Are they safe from any kinds of threats, be it natural or landmines or how do you say, vervolging? And so maybe their own government or other people after them. The second is the rule of law. So is there a justice system that's fair, that's accessible to people, that can, provide justice to grievances. And thirdly, peace building and governance. So we support peace building dialogues. We support build up of the democratic state and politics. So conflict prevention is a very central element and building resilience as well in our DSH TOCs. We have a few cross-cutting items that we see relevant as well: gender, conflict sensitivity, but increasingly also climate change. What does it imply to our, to the goals we want to achieve? Does it counteract? Does it interact? What exactly is happening there? So this interaction with the conflict dynamics is very relevant for us to research, but also to translate into what do we need to change in our typical approaches that we've done to address these root causes. So that's a very, very brief overview of the relation of climate change and DSH's security and rule of law. Perhaps I'll pass it over here to my colleague Karen, who can touch on what it implies to IGG and perhaps also on the relevance. I think she's in the call. Over to Karen.
Yes, I'm here. So my name is Karen Arnon. I'm working as strategic policy advisor at the Inclusive Green Growth Department. So our focus within IGG on climate and security, or climate and conflict, is around three pillars. So the first pillar is focused on the multilateral level, EU, UN, NATO, where we ask attention for the relationship or potential relationship between climate and conflict, or climate and security. The second part of our work consists of development programs, financing of programs, activities, focusing around reducing climate-related conflict risks. For instance, we are financing a program called the Water, Peace and Security Partnership that developed a early warning tool, trying to find out where is water scarcity leading to conflict or has a potential to lead to conflict. And the third part is, of course, what we are discussing here today, the knowledge component. And we try to find the evidence that is supporting our policies. So this is extremely relevant to us. And the questions that we have, I think, can be summarized in why, where, and how. So around the why, is concerned about concerns the understanding of better understanding of the relationship between climate and conflict. There are different views on this. Is there what role does climate have? The where, so which countries are at risk, or which regions, and why, and then the how. And that is, of course, how can our interventions or our development cooperation, our assistance, contribute to preventing or mitigating climate-related security risks? So very short what we're doing. Yeah,
thank you very much. Sorry to cut you short. These are very relevant questions indeed. And as was said, some themes are cross-cutting through the projects. We're going to have a short break now. I suggest, because we have run over time, that we come back at 10:30, and then we start with the presentations of the 3 research projects. I would like to ask the presenters of those projects to stick to 5 minutes, which is very short, but otherwise we run into a time issue later on. Be reminded that to place questions in the chat, and we are collecting the questions and make sure that everybody can find an answer to the question. Martijn, you are suggesting 10 minutes for a break. Okay, let's do that.
No, for the presentations, I meant.
Oh, for the presentations. Okay, sorry. Okay, well, let's say about 7 minutes for the presentation. That is doable. So let's be back at 10:30, and we will start with the first theme of Art de Wulf, who can prepare their presentation perhaps already. See you shortly. Art, I see you still here. Do you have some slides to present that you would like to put up, or you're just going to give a short presentation?
Well, I'll put them up in 1 minute.
Okay, great. Thank you.
you see this? Is this okay?
Yes, it's clear. Thank you. Who is present of your research team, Art? I saw Verena and Johannes. Are you going to present alone, Art?
Yes, I'm going to do the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just quickly get myself some water.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. We are now going to start the second part of the meeting, where the 3 selected research projects have the opportunity to present their research plans. And the first project team is led by Professor Art de Wulf, who's going to present his project on Beyond Cherry Picking, aligning development actors and efforts for inclusive and effective governance of trade-offs and synergies between SDGs in East Africa. Art, you have already put up your slides, so without further ado, I would like to give you the floor.
Okay, thank you, Nikki, and good morning, everyone. You've already heard the title. It's a long title, and what it actually suggests is that if you want to reach the development goals in East Africa, we need inclusive and effective governance of trade-offs and synergies between those SDGs. And we contend in our proposal that this is only possible when the efforts of development actors are better aligned. Where are we going to study that? It's important for our proposal that this is a multi-level study that we're aiming for. We have 3 case studies in 3 countries, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Uganda, that are anchor points for these studies. But they're really meant as anchor points for a multi-level and multi-sector study of SDG trade-offs and interactions and synergies, and particularly the question of how they are governed and how they could be better. govern. So we have in each of these 3 countries one focal SDG, not with the idea to limit the study to that, but to use that SDG as a starting point to explore the many possible interactions in the entire SDG framework. Each of them in a context where some integration is already aimed for, like in water, energy, food nexus programs, in landscape restoration, and climate smart agriculture. This is a central figure in our project proposal because we try to conceptualize what this better alignment between development actors means, what it could look like, and we have identified four mechanisms there. One is donor-recipient alignment. You can see in the top right corner there. So how do donors align with receiving countries of development assistance? Mechanisms there, you could think of the role of embassies, for example, in aligning development cooperation funding with the priorities in the Global South. You can also think about mechanisms like the EU development effectiveness monitoring, trying to assess country by country to what extent these priorities are actually aligned. The second mechanism is public-private alignment. It's been mentioned already. It's not only about governments in this area. Public-private partnerships are often used as a mechanism to improve alignment. But you can also think of things like due diligence requirements for international companies working with vulnerable sectors. So these are examples of mechanisms that we think can create better alignment between development actors, and in that way provide the chance to better deal with trade-offs and synergies. Inter-donor alignment is also a key one. The OECD Development Assistance Committee tries to get its members on the same page and encourages coordination among donors. That could be a mechanism, but you can also think about country-specific donor conferences, for example, at certain points in time. And finally, interdepartmental alignment. This has also already been mentioned. Has a lot to do with policy coherence for development. So are Dutch development cooperation policies in line with trade policies, with other domestic policies? And how can that be improved? And I think the recently installed SDG test, where new Dutch domestic policies are tested for effects on other SDGs, including in developing countries, is a very interesting example there of a potential mechanism. Now, why would development actors engage in this alignment? One reason is that they have been persistently telling themselves that they should. You see on the left here a list of principles that are mostly long-standing and widely accepted as international norms, and they are not formal law, of course, but there are broadly endorsed international norms that relate to effective and inclusive development cooperation. So policy coherence for sustainable development, country ownership of aid, development aid alignment, aid harmonization between donors, and more recently also guidelines for responsible business conduct and inclusive public-private partnership. So in our kind of vision of success or of impact, we imagine that in a well-functioning a polycentric governance system, these SDG interactions, trade-offs and synergies are addressed through these alignment mechanisms, and they're supported by these international norms of effective development cooperation. It's of course a very ambitious vision of success. We want to understand how things work now, where the gaps are, where the possible improvements might be. So what we will do is to try to uncover these governance mechanisms cross-level and cross-sector, and to what extent and how they can transform an SDG governance context that is now fragmented into a system that is that can be considered polycentric, meaning that you still have autonomous actors, but they are better aligned in their actions and therefore able to address trade-offs and build synergies. So roughly 3 steps: identifying trade-offs and synergies, and the work of Pradal is going to be very useful there, I think, in informing our work on that. Second, studying these alignment mechanisms. Where are they absent, and how do they impact trade-offs and synergies. And then as a third question, how can this shared system of rules as part of a polycentric governance system enable these alignment mechanisms? And finally, just a little bit on how our project is structured. And we have the 3 case study work packages at the center. In Ethiopia, Kenya, and Uganda. Each time 2 PhDs are involved, one studying the same case, if you like, but from a global to local perspective, and another PhD from a local to global perspective. So they will, of course, meet each other somewhere. But we want to use this mechanism to really make it into multi-level studies. We are very much interested also in cross-case comparison. That's what work package 1 is mainly aimed for, and work package 5 is very much about the co-production of knowledge. It's also where, for example, we connect to the program level knowledge brokering that we're going to talk about later today, I think. And these are some of the key partners in our resources. These are the co-applicants who have 4 groups at Wageningen University that are all specialized in sustainability governance. We have the Water, Land and Resource Center of Addis Ababa University in Ethiopia, ILRI and ACTS in Kenya, and Makerere University, the Public Health School in Uganda. And finally, I think we also have strong cooperation partners that can help us to keep the research relevant and impactful. The logos you see are of our international cooperation partners, so including OECD and the African Union peer review mechanism. But we also have national government organizations and civil society organizations involved as cooperation partners in this project. And I'll leave it at this for now.
Thank you very much, Art. A fascinating project, and I'm really glad to see the concentration on the case studies that allow for this context-specific insights on SDG interactions and actor alignments. There's a useful suggestion by Lieke Willemsen in the chat, so keep an eye on what happens in the chat. And also I would like to say that Martina of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will say something more about the internal division of tasks within the ministry during the discussion at the end, which is also particularly useful for this project team, I think. Over to the second project, Professor Robert Lensing on improving food and nutrition security by enhancing women's empowerment. Robert, can I give you the floor for this presentation?
Yeah, do you see my screen now?
Yes, it's maybe you can put it on presentation mode.
Okay.
PowerPoint, and then we can start.
Yeah?
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, and my name is Robert Lensing, and I'm very pleased to be able to present our proposal. We are before presenting the proposal, I'd like to say something about our team. We are quite a big team. We are 5 people here today, but it's a kind of a collaboration between the University of Groningen, Brak University in Bangladesh, Haramaya University in Ethiopia. In Groningen, we have social psychologists involved and economists, and also people from the University Medical Center in Groningen. And we have IFPRI on board. So we have a big multidisciplinary team. In terms of research focus, our research contributes to research on trade-offs and synergies between food and nutrition security, SDG 2, and other SDGs. However, rather than fully mapping interdependencies of SDGs 2 with all other SDGs, we primarily focus on interdependencies between SDG 2 and SDG 5, gender equality, and some closely related SDGs like SDG 1, 3, 4, and 6. We will conduct several analyses. I will say something about this more in a minute, but in terms of the main innovations, I think they are threefold. we aim to develop a new pathway framework of how women's empowerment and food security are interrelated and interact with other SDGs. We examine how conventional intervention to improve food security interact with newly developed modules to improve women empowerment. And we'll test and cross-validate the newly developed Women's Empowerment in Nutrition Index. The entire set of activities will be conducted in 4 word packages. They are given here on the screen. I will not explain them in detail here because of the time limits. What is good to know is that we aim to install an advisory board and aim to discuss quite often with stakeholders, including people from the ministry, including people from the other groups. So we like to involve people from the other groups, the 2 other groups also, stakeholders, and maybe as part of that advisory board to, let's say, to interact the discussions a little bit better between the different groups. Now, our study will be conducted in 5 phases, and we aim at the end of each phase to discuss a detailed work plan for the next phase, so that we have a kind of an interactive approach. This ensures that during the study, we will still have ample possibilities to adjust the work plan and to change in case it is needed. In terms of activities, we aim to conduct 3 types of analysis. We start by evaluating prescribed pathway models for interaction between several SDGs using the so-called demographic and health surveys as secondary data. We aim to conduct these analyses for 22 countries out of the list of 27 countries mentioned by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we will conduct analysis per country, but also for different groups of countries and for the entire set of countries merged. And in terms of methodology here, we will construct so-called SEM models with latent constructs. A second type of analysis, we aim to conduct analysis on relationship between women empowerment and food and nutrition security by using existing data sets already collected by IFPRI in Bangladesh and Ethiopia. Bangladesh and Ethiopia are the 2 focus countries of our studies. And here we will conduct so-called panel analysis, which will enable us to better look at feedback loops between different SDGs, and especially, again, between SDG 2 and 5. And finally, it's an important part of our study, we will combine so-called newly developed modules for enhancing women empowerment. So we aim to develop new training modules for women empowerment in 2 countries, in Bangladesh and Ethiopia, and we will layer those new modules on existing platforms to enhance food and nutrition security in Bangladesh and Ethiopia. And here we will use a so-called full factorial design. This implies here that we randomly determine groups that receive one of the treatments. So some groups will only get a nutrition kind of treatment, others a nutrition and a gender treatment, others only a gender, and a final group with no treatment at all. And this enables us to examine interaction between different types of treatments, focusing on the one hand on nutrition, on the other hand on gender issues. And then this also enables us, for instance, to examine whether a nutrition or food security intervention becomes more effective if women are at the same time empowered by another type of intervention. So the interaction between the two types of interventions. I will leave it by this. The final word here is here as part of those, let's say, new trainings. We will also develop this Women in Nutrition Index, and a new type of index we aim to develop, mainly with the help of IFPRI. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. That answered my question on what the abbreviation stands for. Fascinating research indeed, and I'm really excited that you will be looking at some of these complex effects between different SDGs through modeling exercise and have attention for spillover and consecutive effects. Over to the third research team led by Carlijn Moorsink on From Climate Change to Conflict Mitigation Through Insurance, and a long list of names of people involved in the project. Carlijn, over to you, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, great. So this is joint work with Anouk Aerts, Chris Barrett, Erwin Bulte, who is on the call, Charu Chandra from ICRC, Tago Geber-Hibot from ECRC in Ethiopia, Glenn Harrison from Georgia State University, Nathaniel Jensen from ILRI, and Masresha Taye, who is also on the call, Fred Saal, who is on the call, and then John Mutama from the Wangari Maathai Institute for Peace and Environment in Kenya, Gufu Oba, who is currently in Norway, but Kenyan himself, John Plevin from the World Bank, and Mark Schneider from Georgia State University. And the motivation for our research is that there is a suggested positive causal relationship between climate change and conflict. So we will be focusing on SDG 13 and SDG 16, especially in the Sahel and the Horn of Africa. But this evidence is actually not universally accepted, and especially recently, evidence is increasing that this relationship might actually be more complex than we have so far assumed. And in part, earlier evidence faced issues with non-random sample selection. And there were also issues with no measurement of cooperation, the other side of conflict, and a limited understanding of the underlying mechanisms between climate change and conflict. But one of the often suggested mechanisms, which is also policymakers often rely on when motivating interventions, is that weather shocks are assumed to cause resource scarcity, and resource scarcity in turn leads to an increase in conflict-prone strategies, which can then lead to social unrest and conflict. And in this light, an often motivated policy intervention is insurance, as it can smooth financial stress from weather shocks. And indeed, there's evidence that shows that insurance can play an important role in smoothing consumption and protecting vulnerable people against shocks. But the actual relationship between insurance and conflict has not been studied. So we as a consortium have already been working for a long time together on implementing a particular index insurance program in Kenya and Ethiopia. And what we are actually hearing from anecdotal evidence that there might also be suggestions that there might be effects from insurance that actually aggravate conflict. And this is especially important for us to investigate, as there are large international efforts to scale up these insurance programs across the Sahel and the Horn of Africa. And what I'm showing you here is a range of programs that are being implemented in different countries, where the various projects are in different stages of being implemented. So all of these focus on these types of insurances. So what we do in this study is that we want to better understand this link between climate action through the policy intervention of insurance on conflict. And what we then want to specifically think about is if also dependent on the effect that the insurance might have on conflict, can we design and test interventions that can be jointly implemented with insurance to strengthen potential conflict reducing effects or mitigate conflict aggravating effects. And what's really important here is to both think through theoretically and conceptually what might be the relationships between insurance and conflict, and might they be positive or negative, and then to actually implement these interventions to test these hypotheses in the field. And as I said, what we're focusing on is one of the most successful index insurance programs in the world, which is the index-based livestock insurance that is offered to pastoralists in Ethiopia and Kenya. And as I showed you, it's scheduled to be scaled up across a large number of countries across the Horn and the Sahel. So this looks very complicated, but this is the mapping out of the various relationships as we see that now, because this is based on the literature review that we have so far done, between all the variables that potentially link insurance and conflict and insurance and cooperation. But what is important, I don't have time to go over the exact relationship, but what is important here is that here we have the first relationship of how insurance is typically assumed to have a conflict reducing effect, because the idea is insurance, because it provides claim payments, can protect households when they experience shocks so that they don't have to resort to conflict-prone strategies, and thereby the likelihood of conflict is reduced. However, there is also, based on theory, there are two other hypotheses that we have developed. And one is that if you're introducing formal insurance and individuals already rely on informal mechanisms of helping each other out, and what these informal mechanisms do is also cause the fabric of society to be connected. And if formal insurance is introduced, individuals don't need these informal collaborative mechanisms anymore. What might actually happen that if we introduce insurance, it weakens these informal mechanisms that might actually foster cooperation, which could potentially lead to conflict. So that's one mechanism where we're actually concerned that that insurance might have a conflict aggravating effect. And another relationship is what might actually happen is that insurance, by protecting herds in the context of pastoralism, might actually lead to an increase in herd size because people are better capable of protecting their herds because of the insurance. And that in turn, through the idea of the tragedy of the commons, by increasing a herd size and increasing the pressure on resources, this could actually also lead to conflict. So these are the hypotheses that we're going to investigate, and we're going to do this through a two-phased approach. In the first phase, we're going to do qualitative work. In the second phase, quantitative work. And the idea of the first phase is, first of all, to work in Kenya and Ethiopia to map out the mechanisms that we have presented, but surely we have missed many. So this is part of the qualitative work is going to focus on that. That mapping is going to lead into the design of instruments to measure conflict and cooperation. It's going to lead us to design a conflict mitigating intervention that we hope to jointly implement with insurance so that any conflict aggravating effects can be mitigated. And then what's going to be very critical for design is to really think carefully how we can come up with a really strong sample that allows us to investigate all these mechanisms. And in the second phase, we're actually going to use a similar factorial design for our quantitative research, where we're going to implement insurance interventions with conflict mitigating interventions. And that really allows us to investigate what the effects of these interventions are standalone, but also what could happen if we are jointly implementing them together. So what could happen is that there are trade-offs, which we will pick up when we have both interventions, but there might also be synergies, which we can then measure. So the way to represent that is here we have the IBLI intervention, here the conflict intervention, here we will have neither of the two interventions, here we have both of the interventions, and here we have the interventions separately. And I think Nikki was hinting that okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Carlijn. Intriguing research indeed, and I'm very happy that your research team is really trying to look into some of these dynamic effects and also taking an inclusive development perspective, keeping an eye on people who are not covered by the insurance and what are the effects on them. We have a little time extra now before my own presentation, and I'm going to be fair. I will also shorten my presentation to leave some room for clarifying questions and answering to the project teams. So we have about 8 minutes for that. Who would like to ask a question to one of the research teams? If you can raise your hand, then I can give you the floor. Hossein, could you please turn on your video so that we can see you?
Okay, hello everybody. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Well, I appreciate all the three presenters. So I think given the short time, I'm going to just have a couple of comments because we already read all these proposals in detail before. And if you let me, I shall be a little bit to the point. So I'm going to start with the proposal, the project of art. Well, what I liked a lot was that you mentioned about cross comparison case studies. I like it very much. And about the consolidating different SDGs. I think that's really the thing what we need. And that should be your main novelty of your research. Simple comment here, because of your line title, perhaps you could suggest that like an acronym. So later we can easily call you if needed. For the Robert projects, well, I liked a lot the full experimental design, what you are going to use, although I'm a little bit afraid and worried about your timing, because as you know, the full experimental design may need lots of time sometimes, especially when we go to those risky areas like, for example, I don't know, Ethiopia, that we know that the situation is not that stable. I'm going to make a little bit comment on what Caroline presented, but a strong consortium, I already noticed that, and I really liked it very much. And existent and non-existent of insurance, well, what I understand, then you need an experimental design. What you said is like a factorial design. And I think then you may be a little bit more thinking about your timing again, because that needs a lot of time. And the last comment I wish to make perhaps for all these three projects, first of all, because I heard a lot about the mixed methodology, and I'm not sure whether in practice you'll use kind of, let's say, real research design mixed methodology, because what I heard, and I'm a little bit afraid, is perhaps simply kind of triangulation. But while what we need as mixed method is really we need to have some research design mixed method. And the last would be because I do believe that nowadays, well, maybe because my background partly is I'm a geographer. So I think for creating map, which could help a lot to let us understand what is going on in your research, I would suggest if possible, please use kind of GIS map creation. I think that will help a lot, because GIS maps are nowadays used in every disciplines. And I think you can use it simply, I'm not going to ask you to make some deep analysis, map analysis, but at least you could make different layers, like what you said, for example, this SDG, the other SDG, especially for those who use quantitative approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hossein. For those of you who don't know, Hossein is a member of the supervisory team. So your comments and feedback are indeed very useful, and thank you for addressing all three research groups. I saw a hand by Kaosar Afsana, and after that I give the floor to Art, and then we need to move on with the program. But there will be room for discussion later on, so try to focus on questions for clarification.
Thank you so much. I have a question to the third speaker, and the question is about the insurance and conflict risk, conflict reduction. I'm just thinking, because I know that I'm from Bangladesh. So in our country, probably you know that microfinance program is a huge intervention, and there are also insurances. So I know that, you know, what happened sometimes. So just to have a concern or to keep it in mind that insurance is absolutely a successful program in many, many interventions. But I'm just thinking that at the end of the day, why we are introducing this? Climate change is impacting the pastoralists and also the farmers about their livelihoods and other things. So the whole purpose is that, you know, they have a good livelihood. So what are the mechanisms of looking into? I'm sure that there is a pathway. It's not directly climate change and conflict, and in between there is also pathway. So what would be the pathway where insurance is actually giving to enhance their better livelihood, and that would actually reduce the livelihood? Maybe I have missed that in the presentation, and I'm just thinking that it's so important to interconnect the whole pathways, and that would help in also understanding whether, I'm sure that this is going to be a successful program, and if we can keep everything, you know, to be interconnected. Thank you so much, and yeah.
Thank you, Carlijn. Can you give a short answer to that? Is that possible?
Yeah, I wish I could explain all the pathways, but that's a bit, but Kaosar, thank you very much for this question. And in the proposal, we have provided that overview quite in a lot of detail. And the graph that I showed you with all the connections should also help in understanding that. But to be very short here, I think there are two main effects of insurance. The first one is that when individuals experience shocks, they might be limited in their consumption, which might then mean that they have to resort to harmful strategies. Individuals might have to reduce their consumption. They might be restricted in food consumption. They might not be able to pay for health expenditures that they need to make. And on the other hand, a proposition of insurance is that because people are now protected in the case of risk, they might actually increase investments in productivity. So if you're interested, we can talk more about these pathways.
Thank you, Carlijn. Art, a final question to you.
Yeah, I just want to briefly flag a concern based on the presentations and the proposals. I noticed that I think all proposals aim to work in Ethiopia, and the situation is a bit concerning there. And I'm interested to learn, perhaps not to discuss now, but to know from other project teams how are they dealing with that, and perhaps also, since we have the ministry closely involved in this whole program, some inside information from the ministry or the embassy would be very useful, I think, in assessing the risks and perhaps potential strategies for this whole program.
Great. Yeah, I think that's an important point on which we need exchange between all teams and with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you very much for flagging that, Art. I would like to move on with the program now. I will take a short time myself so that we have more room for discussion at 11:15, I would say, because I feel many people would like to raise issues or exchange their ideas with each other. So let me turn to the presentation by the fourth project team, the Knowledge Brokering and Synthesis project, which I will present myself, but on behalf of my entire team, of course. Let me put up the presentation. I hope this is visible. The Knowledge Brokering and Synthesis project, which is a separate project trying to bring together all the knowledge that will emanate from your research projects and through an iterative process synthesize and link up to policy innovations. I'm going to introduce the project team in a minute, but first of all, I would like to say that what do we mean with knowledge brokering? Knowledge brokering involves building bridges. Building bridges across different disciplines, between the SDGs, between expertise, in order to find new grounds, new insights and directions for policy. The team consists of Dzodzi Tsikata, who's professor at University of Ghana, Yannick Gores of The Broker, Kisa Magendane, also at The Broker, and Marta Kapasoglu, also at The Broker. And the two of them have prepared a literature review study that is the first small knowledge product coming out of our project, and that has been sent to you as an attachment. Our role in this process is to come to this continuous exchange and brokering of knowledge, to learn from each other on these complex SDG and interactions through a transdisciplinary approach. So we will not only exchange knowledge between researchers, but also with people from policy, with civil society, and accumulate and build up over the years towards new insights and innovative governance solutions for inclusive development. We will pay attention to trade-offs and synergies. They've been mentioned a lot today, but also to separate effects between SDGs and consecutive effects. And our analytical activities will consist of looking at similarities and differences in findings across the 3 research projects, facilitate a process of cross-interrogation, for example, on underlying assumptions or mechanisms, to conduct stakeholder interviews, and to start up this process of co-creation of governance solutions. The important task that I see ahead of our team is to find a common language between our different expertise across projects, between science and policy, but also between professionals and civil society. The literature review that we've conducted so far is a first phase of a literature review, and we thought it would be good to share with you so that it can also help you in the more specific, theme-specific or country-specific literature review that you undoubtedly are going to conduct yourself as well. And Kisa and Marta have done a wonderful job in pulling this together to look at relevant frameworks that are used to study SDG interactions. We have looked at the literature that has appeared since 2015 until now, and looked at literature on a number of key terms in Google Scholar, and especially SDGs and interactions and a number of other terms, but also combining it with the search term quantitative approach, because the majority of studies applies a quantitative approach. And there are some general findings I just would like to share with you by way of inspiration. A great variety of quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods approaches is applied, although quantitative dominates. A system thinking approach is central to most studies, and I see that back in the 3 research projects as well. Had this notion that SDGs and targets are part of an interlinked system and thus need to be studied as such. Interactions are studied at different levels. Sometimes researchers look into the interaction between targets, sometimes between indicators, or both. Among the most common findings thus far is that synergies outweigh trade-offs but that does not mean there are no trade-offs or there are no conflicts. So we need to keep paying attention to those. The longitudinal fluctuations of synergies and trade-offs remain understudied thus far, and this is mainly due to a lack of data. And there's also a lack of a bit of a common language to describe the SDG interactions. Different terminology is used. So I'm curious to see if we, together with you, can come to a common language. The more specific findings are that some examples, just to give you a flavor of the literature out there, is that some goals cannot be achieved without the prerequisite of another goal to be achieved. We heard Dr. Pradhan speaking about SDG 1, for example, which is associated with many other SDGs. This idea is also supported by the work of Deuge et al., who look into causal loops networks. And I was therefore happy to see in the work of the project team of Robert that they will be looking into feedback mechanisms. Then Breuer et al., who confirmed the general idea that SDG 6, the clean water and sanitation, has the highest number of potential synergies, implying that achieving water targets facilitate the pursuit of other targets. And then Moyer and Bol, who find that many SDGs appear to be achievable at the global level, but when assessed at the country level, many small, poor countries, the fragile states that were mentioned by the ministry, for example, do not achieve targets in any scenario. And last but not least is disaggregating data is needed to take care of the problem of scale and zoning effects and facilitate mapping country spillover effects. And there maybe GIS is indeed a very useful methodology to adopt. Our activities will be many. I'm not going to mention them all. You can review them on the slide later on. We've just started with the literature ahead of you because our project, the decision for our funding was made known a little earlier than yours. So this is why we could have done the literature synthesis already, but there's a second phase to it now that we know what themes you are going to work on. Of course, we want to stimulate as much dialogue and knowledge exchange as possible. So we will contact you on those activities and ask for your participation in that so that we can really benefit from the knowledge that is being accumulated along the way and keep each other on our toes. For example, when interrogating each other's underlying assumptions. And during the last phase, the harvest year, of course, we will be engaged in promoting outputs, help you with doing quick summaries, organize co-creation workshops, and also organize a final stakeholder conference. To conclude, we strive to embark on this joint process with you of bottom-up learning, so from the projects, during the entire project period, not only at the end, but already starting today. Along the way, we would like to foster knowledge exchange with policy and other stakeholders so that there is this continued process of transdisciplinary learning. In doing so, we strive to find a common language and identify innovative governance solutions. And over and beyond the knowledge brokering and synthesis process, I would like to reiterate something that Martijn Winia already mentioned, that there are extra NWO resources to support further knowledge brokering, synthesis, and co-creation initiatives between all project teams involved. And if you have questions, maybe we can address those in the discussion session. That is going to start now. Thank you for your attention. And I would like now to give the floor to, let me see if Yannick is already here. She had to opt out of the first part of the meeting. Otherwise, I hand over to Maria Verschoor of NWO to guide the discussion session. Thank you for your attention, and my contact details are on this slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. I don't know if Nikki's here yet, but I think I will lead the discussion, and Yannicke will definitely also pitch in as soon as she's here.
Great, thank you, Maria, for taking the lead.
Let me see, I will share my screen. I just have to arrange that I can.
Yes, we can see it. If you can put it on presentation mode, please.
Yeah, is it okay now?
Now we see your notes. Yeah, now it's good.
Perfect.
Go ahead.
Great. So, well, great to see everyone here. We've had quite an exchange already today. I think the keynote by Dr. Pradhan on SDG interactions and policy interventions has sparked some ideas also in the research team, also about how knowledge can be relevant to policy and practice. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has also shared their policy interests in SDG interactions, interventions, and their policy questions related to the different themes, which the research will focus on. And the thematic projects themselves has presented what they intend to do, also showing how country-specific information and insights will be generated on the SDG interactions. And finally, also from the Knowledge Brokering and Synthesis project, we have gotten our literature review, which already shows some cross-linkages between projects and the existing literature, but I think also in relation to some policy questions. There's actually a lot of information here, and I think these contributions provide a good entry point to start thinking about thematic connections and relevant collaborations that can be explored and fostered by the program team. And Martijn already explained a bit at the start of this meeting about the project team. This program team will actually initiate and take ownership of cross-cutting knowledge sharing, synthesis, and activities, and develop a scaling strategy. So in this discussion, I would like to take time to do two things. One is take, I said initially 10 minutes, but I think we'll take as long as we have, leave 5 minutes for part two, to share some first ideas on cross-cutting themes, interests, networks we can all identify on the basis of this meeting, and which can also be input for a joint program agenda, which the program team will develop. And secondly, I would like to take just 5 minutes of time to share thoughts on the practical arrangements for the joint program team. And this question will be directed more towards the project team teams who will contribute to this team. And they've been asked to beforehand think about this participation in the team. So first part, what interlinkages and cross-cutting issues can you identify? I think some have come along already during this session. You can think of cross-cutting themes in relation to synergies and trade-offs in the SDGs. You can think of SDG interaction challenges and policy interventions which could jointly be addressed by a program team, about the projects and policy interests and questions which align or where alignment could be found. Joint networks, relevant stakeholders, regions which are relevant for joint knowledge sharing activities in relation to stakeholders from policy practice and even research, and thinking about methodologies and approaches which can be used to study SDG interactions and to contribute to improved policies and practices. And below I've quoted making the whole greater than the sum of its parts. I think individually from projects to people at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and many other stakeholders, links can be made. But the idea of this program team is also to synthesize knowledge and also take a broader perspective. What can we contribute to SDG on interactions with our knowledge we've created on to create better policies which ensure alignment of SDG interactions. So I think I will stop sharing my screen if I can do that, because it's better, I think, if everyone sees each other.
Maybe we can copy paste the question in the chat, Maria.
Yes, I will do that. And I would like to suggest, let me see, my camera is here. I would like to suggest that someone who wants to say something, please raise your hand. We like to collect as much insights on this as you have, but also please place your ideas in the chat so we don't miss your input. And I think it's perhaps, I will copy paste indeed the questions in the chat. And I think seeing that Nikki mentioned that Martine Rutte wanted some time to also explain what relevant links, which themes link up to which persons at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it would be maybe a good idea to give her a start.
Like now, can I
yes.
step in now?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, so several of my colleagues already said something about the three themes of the three research projects from our policy perspective. But I guess it's a good idea to also introduce let my colleagues introduce who have not yet said something to introduce themselves. I hope I am complete, but we have here Veerle Koops. She will be coordinating the whole research project from the ministry's perspective. And then we have Ellen Beyers from who will from the Department for Asia and Oceania. And we have Joost Oosterbrugge and Heino Houwelings from the Department for Sub-Saharan Africa. And we have Dorine Norren. So can I ask my colleagues to introduce themselves briefly and to maybe briefly state their link or how their work links up with the specific projects. So Veerle, Ellen, and then Joost and Heino, and then Dorine.
Sure, thanks Martina. I think you can hear me all. So my name is Veerle. I recently started as a policy officer at the Director General of International Cooperation. I'm replacing Saskia Tjuurtsma, perhaps some of you know her. And in this role here, regarding the NWA SDG program, I will concentrate on the strategy and policy regarding knowledge and knowledge-based working within the ministry. And as such, I'm also I'm the coordinator from the ministry side on the knowledge platform of Include. And with regard to this particular program, my role will be to keep an overview on both the side of the developments at the ministry side, but also at the research side. I'm very sorry, there's construction in my house. Is it doable? Please nod. No, it's not doable. Okay. I'll just make it brief. I'm looking for a concrete way to facilitate really the interaction between the policy side and the researchers. So that would be the next step of this coordinating role, and I will we can discuss that further after this meeting. But I will probably be in touch with most of you. Thanks for that.
Okay, if you can keep the introductions brief so that we can, after that, go back to the contents. Who's next, please?
Can I add to this also, if possible, already identify some cross-cutting issues or relevant networks for creating links between projects and policymakers and perhaps policies?
Yeah. Who's going to introduce next?
Shall I introduce myself briefly? My name is Ellen Beyers. In August, I will start working with DAO, with as a country policy officer for Bangladesh. At the moment, I'm not completely clear on what my role will be in this research project. But I would be very interested to follow up on everything I've heard today. Maybe we can you can also indicate a little bit what will be expected of me in the future.
Okay, I leave that to the questions of the participants. I would like to finish the introduction. Martina, who's next?
My DAF colleagues from the Department for Sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah. Joost, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, good morning all. My colleague Heino should be in the call as well. He will follow up after me. My name is Joost van Oostenbrugge, working for Sub-Saharan Africa Department as a desk officer Kenya. I just missed the part, but and I'm also quite uncertain about my role yet, but I'm very happy to listen in today. And it started off very interesting this morning. So that's for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joost. Martina, is there anyone else? Otherwise, we'd like to continue to the more substantive.
Yes, we had. I thought Heino was going to come.
Correct. Yes, I'm here. Hi, my name is Heino van Houweling, and I'm briefly standing in for Luc, who is our desk officer for Ethiopia. But as I think all of you know, there's quite a lot of going on right now regarding the war in Tigray, and so he needs to focus on that. But I think, of course, Ethiopia is the largest bilateral aid program that we have in the Dutch bilateral development cooperation. So it's very useful for us that this research is also taking Ethiopia into its scope. And when I briefly look at the themes that are listed here, I mean, it will be a challenge, I think, to relate them also to the very, well, the situation is in a lot of flux. And it will be, I mean, how will the research be able to also address the very quick changing environment in which we are working in Ethiopia? Because, of course, there is currently a famine developing in the north of Ethiopia, but we have had many years of addressing food security with development programming, and you know, are we actually achieving the impact that we wanted in terms of sustainable results on food security, but also the relationship between food security and other SDGs. In the case of Ethiopia, SDG 16 is then, of course, very relevant, is one thing that comes to mind, but also indeed climate change and conflict. So I think we are with a whole range of SDGs in our development program active in Ethiopia. I think all our themes are involved. And so I think the research will be very relevant for us for the program that we have in Ethiopia. So that's a few points that I would like to make. But I think the difficulty going forward is the fact that the context is very much in flux.
Thank you very much, Heino, also for pointing out this difficulty which will arise. And I think also, I guess projects can be in contact with you and the ministry also about how to deal with this. And also you gave some thematic links, reflected on some potential thematic links. I'd like now to ask actually really the projects to also going back to the questions I posed at the beginning about the different types of interactions and joint activities, knowledge sharing you might be undertaking, joint stakeholders you see, joint policy challenges. I give them the floor to really just tell what they see they can do jointly, and also perhaps in relation to Heino, what you were saying about
Maria,
connections.
I have one more colleague that I want to present, Dorine, just briefly. Because I think it's Yeah, very briefly, but it's
very
important
briefly.
that you know who's here. Yeah.
Thank you.
For further context. Okay.
I had raised my hand already half an hour. I have actually 3 questions. I'm both a researcher and a policy officer at the Foreign Ministry. So I work at the Western Hemisphere Department as a strategic advisor. So my first question is actually also to my colleagues: how do we involve regions that are not focus areas of DGIS, of our Department of International Cooperation? As you know, Latin America and the Caribbean have been very hard hit by the COVID pandemic, have had the largest economic contraction, and we have hardly any cooperation programs there. Does that also mean that there is no research focused on these kind of areas? That was my first policy question. Secondly, I'm a researcher and I also looked at different indigenous philosophies of well-being, like Ubuntu philosophy. And my question is on the SDGs and development cooperation. My question is to Carlijn, and she also responded to it in the chat. And to what extent your project looks at African philosophy, because I was very interested in the tension that you indicated between modern mechanisms of insurance and traditional ways of solidarity, which are derived from African philosophy. And are you then also going to draw a more general conclusion on the importance of these kind of philosophies for our development cooperation programs? And my third question, very briefly, is to Nikki Powell. I am, other than a policy officer and a scientist, also an artist, and I was wondering whether when you talk about transdisciplinary research, whether you also involve art disciplines. For example, you have the Oral Festival, you have theater programs, or other artists who look at rights for nature and who can communicate effectively to the public also on SDGs. So sorry for my long question list.
Thank you, Dorine. I'm actually now shortly looking at Nikki, whether we would like to answer these questions now or individual connections can be made, so we can continue with the cross-cutting issues. What would you prefer?
I would like to suggest to respond to 2 answers that were given on your question on the cross-cutting themes.
Okay.
So they are in the chat. Yeah. So one is by Johannes.
Yep. Actually, there's you mean highlight these, because I think there's.
Yes, please.
There's one more. So Tsikata, apologies if I say your name correctly, says that no doubt several interconnections will surface as the research goes on, which I agree. But now one cross-cutting theme already identified and which is found to be particularly interesting is on methodologies and approach to the study. So perhaps we can invest some critical examination of these methods in terms of their trade-offs and synergies. And I think this is a fair point. I think this was one of the issues on which collaboration could take place, definitely, which a program team can take up on. And then Johannes Atela sees as a key cross-cutting theme the resilience to global challenges, also social inclusivity, knowledge brokering as a cross-cutting event, though handled from a separate project. I would definitely agree that this is something you can jointly learn and also be innovative in, I think. And then Firne has indicated that it would be good to involve embassies as well, especially in the very contexts that are under a lot of stress. I think that's very relevant also looking at Ethiopia. And let me see. Yes. So I think I see some hands raised. I hope people can also reflect on these cross-cutting themes which are mentioned. Johannes Atela, can I give you the word?
Thank you, Maria, and thanks everyone. My name is Johannes Atela. I'm from Kenya, and I'm part of the team led by Professor Art. So we are really excited to be part of this initiative because we think it's very relevant to Kenya as a country, but also more broadly, Africa. In the interest of time, I just have one question. I think the other questions I've posted on the chat, which have also been well answered. you know, I'm looking at trying to think about the SDG interactions, and I was wondering to what extent are the initiatives, of course, which have been funded, but also, you know, from the NWO, to what extent they are looking at the element of the political economy of these interactions. And the reason I ask this is because a lot of these interactions basically can be enabled or impeded by the politics of, you know, interests and various elements. And so while the content could be well aligned in terms of seeing where the trade-offs and synergies are, the element of, you know, the politics in terms of enabling those synergies and trade-offs is very critical. So I wonder to what extent, I know in our project, we are going to try and try to understand, because we're looking at the governance of the SDGs. But I wonder whether this is something that can be reflected upon, because if you look at even the element of impact and knowledge brokerage, there is a great deal of understanding those pathways that could basically steer the brokerage element. So that's my comment for now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Johannes Attila. I think can some of the other projects respond, whether they focus on or political economy interactions are part of the research projects, and perhaps this could be something which a joint team could work on further.
So this is Caroline. Thank you, yes. Johannes. I think you're asking a really relevant question, and I think there is the political economy locally here, which touches a little bit also on, for example, Dorian's question, which is asking about, you have your informal institutions, you have your formal institutions. Formal institutions perhaps come with particular pressures or powers from the perspective of the government. So how do these interact, and how can these be perhaps built in a way that they can be implemented together? That's definitely a question that like we've already, based on the theory, thought about, like, could we, if we find that formal insurances have a potential to crowd out these informal mechanisms, then would it, for example, be possible, if we're worried about that, to build the structure of formal insurance on, for example, local informal risk-sharing groups or local cooperatives, so that there can be a synergy there. And ILRI has already, through their IBLI, built the promotion of the IBLI index insurance through the cooperative systems that are traditionally there that provide these informal risk-sharing networks. So I think there it's one question, that's more at the local level. But I think the question is even much bigger at the level of national level, or even also in the Netherlands. And we've come across that one of our partners is Anouk Aerts from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, working in DDE. And then we have Karen Arnon and Jeroen Muntinga from different departments focusing on either peace and conflict and climate change. And actually with them, particularly also through Anouk, we have already talked about the fact that addressing this issue of potentially scaling up insurance, because there are also these risks, the only way to do that is to actually think about bringing these partners together and develop a joint strategy, rather than them just implementing insurance, one implementing these conflict interactions. Of course, I do not yet have an answer on how to do that, but also we are already planning conversations on how to build these programs more closely together. So I think it's one of the most relevant questions, and be interested to hear. I suspect that Robert would have also encountered this when thinking about food security and gender topics. So thanks, Johannes, and also Dorine for the great questions.
Thank you, Caroline. Perhaps if Robert would like to respond, but very shortly, so we also have some time for other cross-cutting issues which have been identified.
Yeah, very shortly. I agree with what Carlijn was saying. We have not specifically, let's say, a plan yet how to take those on board, those issues, but we certainly aim to discuss, let's say, with policymakers in the two countries and to see to what extent the different interventions, let's say, can be scaled up and how to do so and how this interacts with, yeah, with the policymakers in the countries and yeah, we're very open to discuss this issue further also with the other teams.
Great.
I agree with the importance of this issue.
Okay, great. Good to hear. So we already have one topic which will definitely be further focused in the program group. I see that Gustavo, you could take the word yourself, but you flagged the point by Dorina about integrating other global southern regions. I guess the question is whether this would be possible in a program team, whether something could be said about regions, so not solely about the country which projects focus on. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it just invites me to think of the parallels and the comparative potential of these projects for thinking about this in a global perspective, no? And,
okay.
of course, beyond the priority regions, as Doreen was suggesting, but also even within the priority regions, of course, there is a great potential of these three projects to go beyond the country level or beyond the selected countries, no? To say something more about what does this mean at a global scale or in comparison to other regions and to other, of course, my own interest being Caribbean and Latin America, I'm very, very looking forward to learning and thinking about these comparative dimensions from my own experiences and research interests. So thank you for the opportunity of being here.
Great, and thanks for clarifying this. And I think this is a very relevant point also to see what on a regional or even global scale the projects can jointly contribute. Is there any one of the projects who can already say something about this, whether they see this happening or how, or otherwise, yeah.
Oh, sorry, yeah. No, it's a very relevant question, but also very difficult because, let's say, in the time frame we have, let's say it's kind of a trade-off between going into depth or spread out over various countries. So what we aim to do is we focus on two countries, but in terms of secondary data analysis, we try to bring much more countries on board. So that means that we will be able to say a bit more about other regions as well. And we aim also to do kind of secondary data, which is available already, kind of regional analysis. But the in-depth analysis will definitely focus on two countries. And I think that we should do so because the risk, of course, is that we otherwise have, let's say, yeah, that we use the rigor of the research. But I see the importance, so we will try to deal with it, but the focus will be on two countries.
Great, thank you. And I think this is indeed also very much a topic which a program team can have discussions on, also with relevant stakeholders to further explore, actually. So I see, Dorina, you still have your hand raised. Did you have a new issue?
I can't seem to disable my hand. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. That's okay. Then can I ask Masresha Taye? And again, apologies if I mispronounced your name.
It's all right. I'm Masresha Taye from ILRE. I just wanted to add on what Caroline just said. The insurance product that we have been engaged in Northern Kenya and Southern Ethiopia. One is it pays for pastoralists before a drought happens. So it is a predictive or early warning mechanism to pastoralists to start reorienting or re-strategizing some of the adaptive or coping strategies they have. This also includes social insurance, which is the traditional coping mechanisms that they have. So far, as part of our impact studies and narratives, we have stress cells or impact on consumption smoothing activities, but we haven't actually seen if it positively or negatively influences their migration strategies, because pastoralists during stress periods will start to orient themselves to go to different directions, which might increase or decrease conflicts among other pastoralists in the entire region. So this is also to bear in mind that how it is linked with multiple cropping strategies pastoralists have. Drought could be one single factor, but it has multiple faces among pastoralists, and conflict is one of the leading issues. So I just wanted to raise this one. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Let me see, I saw that, that Joanna's suggested, but that was in relation to the political economy part, that a short study would be done by this program group, which I think is a good idea. Then Kiza Magendane asked, how is the ministry going to collaborate with other ministries within the government in the process of this research? And I think that relates to making relevant connections to stakeholders who could benefit from the research insights, and also the a joint knowledge sharing strategy. I think it's also a bit of a practical question, so I can give the floor perhaps to Martina, but ask her to keep it really short.
No, I just replied in the chat. I think it depends
great.
on the direction of the research. We didn't want to predefine this in advance, because it really depends. And I am guessing that lessons learned can apply to other policies as well and affect our cooperation. But I would suggest a practical and flexible approach.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, Martina. So Nikki Pao, I think Nikki, you would also like the word, so I'd give you the floor now, please.
Thank you. Yeah, in response to several issues that were brought to the table, I think that the theme of social inclusivity indeed is something that runs across. As we all know, inclusion at the same time means exclusion. And I think this is something that we should be continuously aware of also in implementing the research. And this brings me to the other point that was also brought to the table, that knowledge brokering, or maybe knowledge systems as such, can be a cross-cutting theme, because as researchers, and also as policymakers, we should continuously reflect on whose knowledge counts. And answering to Doreen's question, of course, different knowledges should be counted in. And but because of our methodologies, or because of our own assumptions and networks, we tend to rely on certain dominant knowledges, and we should not forget to include alternative knowledge systems. So I think what other ways of knowing is out there, how is it sidelined, how can it be included, is perhaps another cross-cutting theme that the project's teams can consider. Thank you, Maria.
Okay, thank you very much for this contribution, Nikki. Are there any members of the teams or any other persons who would like to reflect on these ideas of Nikki? I think it was very clear, Nikki. So thank you for your contributions, and this can be taken up definitely in the program team. And I still see a lot of messages coming in, but we actually have a second section, a very short practical question on how this program team is going to organize. And I think that these discussions on potential cross-cutting themes will continue, and you will continue to see more interlinkages. So now, shortly recapitulating, I think Nikki said, well, we need to think about inclusivity and knowledge brokering, including knowledge not only from a Northern perspective, also Southern perspective. We've had a political economy focus, the idea to think about ways to make knowledge and insight from project relevant for regions or even on a global scale. And I think these for now are the most important, but of course, many more issues will come up which this program team can explore. So thank you very much for all your contributions. Keep on posting in the chat more ideas. So we will take them along and share them with the program team. So allow me to shortly again share my screen. And apologies that I again have to put it on. Here we go. Because I think now we've seen there's a lot of interlinkages to further investigate, but the question is also how will we continue? So I would like to take these 5 more minutes or 4 more minutes to allow the project teams to share their first thoughts on the organization of a program team. Who from the project will join the team? Is there any interest from the project teams to take a coordination or a leading role in the team? And also perhaps some initial ideas on how, where, and when we could meet during the inception phase. Projects have been asked to think about this beforehand, so I hope this has helped in providing some of the answers now. And in view of time, I'd like to go project by project, ask them to share their ideas. And I'd like to start with the project of Carlijn Morsink. So Carlijn, you or if any of your team members could respond to these questions, that would be great.
Yeah, so I think it's we in the team thought that it's very important to have at least one of our African universities, so either in Ethiopia or Kenya. So I would think that it would be Dr. Tagal Gebrhiwot, who would like to join the program team. And then I would myself like to join the program team. So I don't know how many people we were supposed to suggest. We haven't particularly focused on the question of taking a coordination or a leading role. But do you mean within our team or in the program team itself?
I mean the program team itself, yes.
Okay. We haven't particularly discussed this. And ideas on how, where, and when to meet during the inception phase. Well, I think that's a very difficult question to answer at this moment. I think at this moment in time, we can still do a lot virtually. And I would be like, even with this meeting that we're having now, we actually don't have some of our core PIs on the call because they are in the US. And we would have really liked to, and we found people to replace them from the same organizations. But I think the ease with which large parts of the consortium can join if we are keeping these meetings virtual is actually really great. And I'm sure that it will really facilitate that. So in our heads, it has been virtually, at least for the, and especially because for the partners in lots of the countries that we're talking about, I don't suspect that it will be safe for them to travel in the upcoming year.
Okay.
So,
great, thank you for sharing your thoughts. And I think it's very good that a Southern partner also joins the team to bring in this perspective. So great to hear that. And I think that 2 persons would be fine. We have to see how the project team is going to work, or yourself, because you will have also a self-organizing role. And you make a fair point about virtual meetings and actually inclusivity. In that sense, so apologies. So that will be definitely taken along and can be discussed by the joint program team, I think. So thanks again, Carlijn. Then Robert, can I ask you to also reflect on these questions?
Yeah, very briefly. We actually haven't discussed this in detail before, but I would definitely like to be part of the program team. And I was also wondering, same question as Carlijn had, so how many people from the team can actually join. So I would certainly prefer to have somebody from Bangladesh, and Afsana is now in the meeting, and probably I hope she will be willing to join the program team as well. And maybe from Ethiopia also, and Temesgen Belissa is in the meeting, and I hope that he will join, will be willing to join as well. I share also the, let's say, the view by Carlijn that the importance of having virtual meetings. So I don't know, we haven't discussed the second question, so I think we should do that later.
Okay, yeah. Good. Thanks for your input. And again, I think the program team is also, you will organize yourself. So in terms of how many people will join, I can imagine that having people from the different countries and regions involved makes a lot of sense. Yeah. But it's also something you can discuss and discover yourself what works best. So thank you, Robert, also for your reflection on this. Art, can I ask you also to pitch in, please?
Yes, thank you. I must say it does raise some questions also with me. Of course, in the proposal, we have considered how to cooperate with the synthesis project and the knowledge brokering at the program level. So I think that is relatively clear to me. It's less clear what the program team will actually be doing. I'm happy to be part of it as coordinator of this first project, but I'm not so clear what kind of commitment I am taking on there, or what other consortium partners would be expected to do there. So I think in terms of coordination, I think I'll certainly have my hands full in coordinating my own project. So and we do need to coordinate. I think it's a good point, this third point on when and where to meet during the inception phase. We have a kickoff meeting now, but there's also, in the different projects, probably kickoff meetings, and maybe kickoff meetings in the Netherlands, and perhaps also on the locations where we are going to work. So yeah, we need to also be aware, be cautious that we are not organizing too many kickoff meetings, perhaps, and see that everybody can be involved at the right moment for the right purpose. So I am a bit curious. What I'm not clear. Maybe I missed it on what exactly the program team will do, because I understood this is the NWO team, but you're expanding it with people from the projects, apparently. Thank you.
Yes, I will just very briefly explain also in view of time. I think in the call, it was also explained the idea is that the thematic projects jointly form a program team. This was also described in the call, and I think has been taken along. We will collaborate with the knowledge and synthesis and brokering team to think of a strategy to also both think about the synthesis of knowledge, but also the broader thinking about ways to reach broader audiences, to share the knowledge to relevant stakeholders from policy and practice. So this was indeed intended to be a collaboration between the product team and also the knowledge brokering and synthesis project. So in a sense, this is actually really an integral part to also contribute to your program level activities. So that would be my first response to your question. I hope this clarifies things a bit. And I understand that maybe you don't foresee a coordinating role in this, but it would be great if you can indeed discuss with your team who could join such a team. And I think one of the things also that I think that the arranging policy dialogues was also one of the things that the team was going to take up. So there's some important contributions which you're expected to make to this programming overarching goal. So I think it's good if you take some more time to discuss with the team who could join. And I think also we've already identified some very relevant themes on which collaboration could take place. So lastly, of course, the knowledge brokering and synthesis project is also very important. They already start doing some work on thinking about how the knowledge can be synthesized, and also relevant practitioner audiences, which could be served by the program. So I would either like to ask Nikki or Yannicke, if she's here, also to provide their perspective on what their role could be, how they would contribute to this program team.
Yeah, I think we need to also come to the roundup, and indeed I will respond to your question, but also maybe clarify that at least the way I see it is that the question on the program team is to identify cross-cutting themes that go over and beyond the immediate research outputs and outcomes of your studies. And they are yet to be identified, but I think some useful ideas have been mentioned. And of course, our team or me personally would very much like to play a role in that. And I see this related, but also separate from the knowledge brokering and synthesis project that really has to concentrate on your immediate project findings. Yeah, of course, it's all very closely related, and it's also a new funding. Maybe Martijn, you can say one more thing about it, and I think we are exploring, yeah, its specific purpose and goal of it. Martijn, can I ask you to say a little bit thing before I round off?
Yeah, certainly. First of all, I enjoyed very much meeting you and hearing from all of you. And for me, it's a very positive indication that actually we are short of time. That means that we have quite a lot to move on together. Yeah, regarding the program team, what we have learned from past programs is that working together, identifying cross linkages, synthesis, etc., often came as an afterthought. So the research has been going on for a number of years, and then suddenly we have to see where we can learn from each other. With this program, we try to turn that around. So right from the beginning, we want to identify, yeah, where we can actually inspire each other and do more with the knowledge that is being generated within the projects. So that implies that either we as the research funder could steer that process, or we would ask the policy representatives from the ministry and other stakeholders together with the researchers to do that themselves. And we've chosen to pilot the latter approach. So that gives you a lot of opportunities, yeah, but also a commitment from all the projects to shape that process yourselves. So Art, indeed, it may raise a lot of questions, and I think we can continue that in a later session to see how we can implement that. But indeed, it is an open process. So some of the questions that you are raising, I think you can also try to come up with suggestions yourself.
Yeah, if I may briefly respond, I think that, yeah, that's very good to learn. It clarifies a lot, I think. And indeed, the way and how we want to work together, I think we also need to discuss that. And also in relation, I think, to the synthesis project, because I have some understanding of it, but there's many possible ways that we could link up. So I would also appreciate if we can further discuss the modalities of that and the way that it can actually be supportive to the projects that are going on.
Can I also?
Oh, sorry.
Can I, Maria? Or yeah. So
I'm looking at Nikki actually in terms of time.
I'll be brief. I'll make a very brief suggestion.
Very brief suggestion.
Yeah, I think because we don't have any clarity about what this task is going to be, and I gladly volunteer myself, but I have to coordinate this program, which is what Art also said. Rather than us already defining now who are the program leader people, don't we want to start by first having a conversation between the coordinating people about what this is going to be, and then deciding who would be best fit to actually fill those roles?
Thank you, Caroline. Yes, I
agree with you.
Yeah, I think, sorry, Nikki, I very much agree with, I think this is a very good suggestion. And I just like to add one thing. I think as NWO, we can also provide sort of a facilitating role. So not really coordinating, but facilitating, also in terms of potentially developing an impact plan approach, which is really thinking about a joint goals. We'd like to set joint contributions to practice and policy and perhaps science we'd like to make, and what we need to do to achieve this. So this would be an offer from us also at the start of your discussions about how you're going to do this to help you in this process. Yeah. Thanks, Nikki.
Thank you, Maria and Martijn. We are still learning. Indeed, to all the project team coordinators, I would like to say that we will be in touch on behalf of the Knowledge Brokering and Synthesis project and how to organize further interaction amongst us and also policy stakeholders. I would like to thank everybody for participating in this inspiring meeting. I think we can continue to talk about research all day, but your time is very precious, and we've already been taking a lot of time of you. I hope the initiative of this meeting will instigate a more structured collaboration between policy and research, and we can more easily find each other after today. Yeah, I hope to see you in the near future and wish you lots and lots of success with the research projects. On behalf of the knowledge brokering team, we will be in touch. And thank you once again for your participation. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.